And now, without any further ado, we will move to the next second panel. As MACIS continues to move to its second panel discussion titled Building a Sustainable Art Market for African Narratives, this panel will explore how Africa's cultural and artistic narratives can be strengthened through sustainable market structures, international collaboration, and greater visibility for African artists on a global stage. This discussion will focus on building an ecosystem that supports artists, collectors, institutions, and cultural entrepreneurs while preserving authenticity and diversity of African storytelling through arts, which will resonate what Emmanuel Defray's questions he asked earlier. And the panel features distinguished group of speakers, starting with 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗶𝗶𝗶, Program Officer from UNESCO Office, Kenya, 𝗦𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗏, cultural producer and founder of 𝗕𝗂𝘂𝗀𝗏 Studio from Ghana. We have wonderful speaker, Mr. 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗶𝗶𝗏, the director of Nelson Mandela Center, and our wonderful Monica, coming from all the way to Italy. She's the founder of 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏 Art Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be moderated by 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Is it right? 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is the founder of 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. This panel will discuss strategies to strengthen Africa's art ecosystem, encourage cultural investment, and create sustainable opportunity for African artists and cultural institutions while amplifying African narratives globally. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome the moderator on stage, 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who is the founder of 𝗕𝗂𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, a global strategy communication consultancy advising leading Web3 companies on media, public affairs, and market positioning. Laura comes from Dubai. Please join us on stage.
𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, Program Officer of UNESCO Regional Office of Eastern Africa. Please, a warm round of applause. We also have with us 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, cultural producer and data artist and founder of 𝗕𝗂𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Studio. We have joining us 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Arts Foundation 𝗕𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Warm round of applause. And last but not least, we have 𝗕𝗂𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Director of Nelson Mandela Center. We have joining us 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 leaders, but also as a powerful driver of economic development, innovation, and international cooperation. Across Africa and the Indian Ocean region, cultural initiatives from heritage preservation to contemporary artistic production are helping shape these new narratives while opening tangible opportunities for communities and creative professionals alike. So we're aiming to have a very interactive discussion. We have questions that are set for yourselves and some others where you're super welcome to chime in. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get started with Faith. And question for you, Faith. So, UNESCO has long emphasized the role of culture as a driver for sustainable development and international cooperation. From your perspective, how can cultural heritage and creative industries contribute to sustainable development across Africa and the Indian Ocean region?
Thank you very much. Is it afternoon already? I believe it's 12, so I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon. Good. As mentioned, my name is 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗶𝗶. I'm a program officer with the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa in Nairobi, Kenya. So back to your question, and first I must mention about the preamble for UNESCO, which talks about, it's very brief, but it's very impactful. It says that since wars begin in the minds of men and women, it is still in the minds of men and women where the defenses of peace must be constructed. That particular preamble or statement carries everything about sustainability. It actually carries everything about culture being a very powerful tool when you're talking about peace, when you're talking about inclusivity, when you're talking about ensuring there's mutual respect among nations, among states. And this is because we find that at UNESCO and in the culture sector, we work towards ensuring that we have tangible results, in the sense that can we have dialogue when you're talking about culture and creative industries? Do we have mutual respect? Do we have capacity building that we are emphasizing? Are we ensuring that we are also preserving our cultural heritage? So among all of this, these are some of the ways in which we find that we are grounded as culture, and more so when we're talking about the creative culture and creative industries, to ensure that it is sustainable. And I'll give you a story, very brief. In 2022, we had, there was a filmmaker in Madagascar who did a very short documentary about the traditional ways of fishing in Madagascar. The film got an international recognition for that particular rich identity, rich traditional values of the film. But to look at it in the country level, it got very little recognition. It got very little monetization of it, because at the end of the day, we're looking at the economic value of it. And at the end of the day, you find that this filmmaker went home with nothing. So what are we trying to say is it sustainable? Are we having the culture and creative sector or industries at the center where it's sustainable? And when we're looking at this, we're looking from the statistics that have been mentioned from the previous panels, we find that in Africa, we have less than 1% of cultural exports being done, and even cultural goods being done. Yet Africa is the most vibrant continent that you can ever find. I mean, look at yourselves, go around Africa. So we need to clap for ourselves for what we're doing. But then again, you come back down to the question of what can be done. What is really being done actually? What are we doing actually on the ground? And this goes back to the issue of, let's go back to our countries. I was interacting with one of the panelists, I believe she'll be a panelist at some point, and I know that the Indian Ocean Commission, which has support from UNESCO, is doing a very beautiful project on the culture and creative industries, and here in Mauritius as a pilot. And when you look at it, you find that Mauritius already has set up a good example when it comes to CCIs, with about 10.5 businesses that are in culture and creative industries registered. We are looking at it in the sense that we have the recent numbers of GDP when it comes to culture and creative industries here. So when we're looking at it, these are some of the samples that we can pick up and run with it. Look at other countries, what are they doing? When we look at Madagascar and Seychelles, they have very tangible safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage, actually, that is really taking structure in those particular countries. And you can find that as time moves by, these are some of the things that we find they are increasing in ensuring that the GDP of the country increases. But it is not only economic, but we are looking also on the preservation, the value, the integrity. Are we still having the identity of the communities being preserved? Those are the elements that we're looking into to ensure that we have sustainable development. We have a program that is being supported by UNESCO in South Africa called the 𝗔𝗳𝗿 program. I know it has a middle name, which is South African. I mean, it might be hard to be able to mention it, but this is a particular program that was being introduced in South Africa. And you find that out of this particular program, and again, as you all know, UNESCO has the 2005 convention that talks about the protection and promotion of cultural diversity, or the expressions of cultural diversity. And you find that most of the countries, UNESCO member states, have ratified this particular convention, and that gives leeway to have projects like the 𝗔𝗳𝗿, the projects that are being done even in other countries, to ensure that the escalation of culture, CCIs, and that is culture and creative industries, is being done internally in the countries, but also ensuring that we also have, apart from the economic value of it, because yes, we'll have economic value of it, but are we ensuring that we have intergenerational knowledge? So emphasizing on that intergenerational knowledge, how are we doing it? We're having capacity building. UNESCO offers technical support for member states in case you want support in terms of CCIs. And you stand a big chance, and I must recognize Mauritius for taking this up and ensuring they're running with it, where they're getting support in different ways of how they can ensure that CCIs in the country is being publicized. And this again goes back to how then does it become sustainable? It becomes sustainable because you have visibility, because once you do something in your country and we do not see it, then it means that it's like not doing it. But we find that Mauritius and also other countries, they have been able to invest in digital platforms. Of course, more can be done, but having that already is giving you visibility, is giving you branding, is giving you market access, and we have the regional integration where people get to know what you're doing, people get to support you, people get to understand, apart from ensuring that we give you the economic value of whatever you're doing in terms of CCIs, how can we ensure that it progresses from one generation to another? Thinking too, to ensure that we have sustainable
Your
development.
foundation has been instrumental in promoting contemporary art from non-Western regions, supporting artists through exhibitions, documentaries, and international platforms. So what initially inspired you to focus on artists from Africa, Asia, and other underrepresented regions? And what have you learned from working closely with these artistic communities?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Taya. It's a pleasure. I think a lot has been said already. I mean, we are just the second panel, but we are talking about ecosystem, financial players, market. So what I can say is about my experience, so my personal experience. So I'm not an art operator, so I'm a lawyer, and I'm a business lawyer in Italy and France. So, but I'm always keen about art, and especially about African art. I love Africa. I'm not African, but I'm African by soul. So I started to collect, and then some African artists, and then I understood that you can buy 1 to 10 works. This will never change the situation. I mean, being a collector is good. What was Megan saying before, buy art, why not? But it's just a beginning. It will not change much. So what pushed me to make a foundation was this the idea that I want to do a social impact through art. Art has a soft power for social impact, and we should use it. Why? Because I'm Italian, so you can see in Italy we have the Catholic Church, we are the center of the power, we were at least, and how always the powerful institution used artists to celebrate themselves all the time, from the church, from the Renaissance, but so the power used artists. But I wish the artists to use the power. So to reverse this sort of frustrating relationship. So I made this foundation, and I set up in the United States, in New York. And then instead of collecting, I said I want to do projects for enabling the artists to be more visible. And I started with scholarship in Paris, with the 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗶 of Paris, for 1 year of scholarship, and it was great. It worked, even if I was an art outsider. This was possible in Paris, thank you to the 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗶. And then I continued. So what I saw, what struck me was, of course, the environment and the North global ones. And the one also, what it was, when I talked to the African artists that were part of my project, what they told me at the first, say, we want to be visible, but we don't want to change our residence. We want to stay here in our countries. What was frustrating for them, that in order to be successful, they should live in abroad. in America or in Europe, in London, Paris, New York, and they didn't want to. And I think this is very crucial. So that's why this initiative I found finally after 15 years I'm doing this adventure is the first time we are talking about making something here in Africa. This is so important because even for the Biennale of Venice, that by the way, we don't forget 𝗕𝗂𝗀𝗶𝗶, who was meant to be the artistic director of this coming Biennale. So it's an African woman having the first time this job. But Venice Biennale, who is the most important platform since ever, is not a global. How can we judge it global platform when it fails to include a majority of an entire continent represented there? So let's think about it. I think that this panel doesn't have easy question, doesn't have easy answers. So it's a dialogue, and so for the first question, I think I reply. I don't know.
Of culture,
That's great.
that
We
is
come
culture
back to you
creative
later.
industries is
So,
being done
Whitney,
internally in the countries,
you practice
but also
complex
ensuring that we also have, apart from the economic value of it, because yes, we have economic value of it, but are we ensuring that we have intergenerational knowledge?
And how do you
So emphasizing on that intergenerational knowledge, how are we doing it?
I'm very honored to be a creative voice on the panel, in the room, the first so far. Before I share a personal anecdote of what led me into this creative practice, I want to start with the utility of this practice. We are in a time where there are a lot of global complexities, and there is such a gap between the highest level of policy and heterogeneity and the public that needs information better. And this gap is partly because a lot of the data that is being discussed in rooms about people's lives do not make it out of those rooms for many reasons, like language barriers, economic barriers, and accessibility issues. Art, as we've spoken about so far, is an interesting cultural asset that has scientific benefits in learning and education. Visuals are one of the most inclusive forms of communication compared to written communication, for example. And so when you understand that data, visual communication has an opportunity to include the majority of public and convert research into a common good, then there's an opportunity for artists to participate beyond gallery space and beyond exhibitions. And that is where artists like me come in. My work is I'm a data artist. And so what I do is that I collaborate with researchers and institutions, local experts, to disseminate and democratize knowledge to the public, to help bridge that gap of communication that exists in modern time. And now the story of my personal experience. I'm a nerd, and so through and through, I absolutely love information. Since 2009, when I was 8 years old, you can calculate my age now. In 2009, when I was 8 years old, I started writing down my life. So in my room, I have 7 books. You can read everything about me from 8 years old to 21 years old. But you find that there are some stories that written language cannot capture the nuance of, and that's why I turned to visual documentation. But in recent times, I have, especially because of 2020, when all of us were online, and there was an abundance of data, and the online data became more pertinent than our real life experiences, we saw reality through the data that we were consuming online. And that is when I created my first data art, documenting 230 current affair headlines globally on one canvas. And since then, I've continued to collaborate with researchers like 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗶 from Switzerland, all the way home to multilateral institutions like the African Union, to help them take the information that's been buried in documentaries, in reports, and in insightful documents, and disseminate it through exhibitions and cultural programming. So I've answered the why, but I want to touch a little bit more on how this touched on research, policy, and public engagement. When you create visual art and you invite people with color and vibrancy. You can confront them with conversations that they would never have usually gone out of their way to find out. There are histories that people who aren't already experts will not go and search for. But in an exhibition room, everything is level ground. From children all the way to adults, from experts to non-adults, everyone is able to commune and interact. And I think in present time, this is the kind of thing that we need. A way where people can commune and be interacted with, where valid information can be shared correctly, and where information can become something that is inclusive and accessible. And that is where I believe visual arts comes in, and that's why I practice the way that I do. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Stefan, so your work as a historian focuses on slavery, resistance, and the African roots of Mauritian identity. Why is it important today to continue researching and sharing these stories, particularly in societies shaped by colonial legacies?
Thank you for your question. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you be more enthusiastic? Good afternoon, everyone. Very good. So I'm 𝗕𝗂𝗶𝗹𝗶𝗶, historian, researcher, and director of the Nelson Mandela Center under the aegis of Ministry of Arts and Culture. And researching and sharing the histories of slavery is an act of resistance, and we contribute to what we call historical justice. In societies like Mauritius, these paths continue to shape identities, inequalities, and collective memory, yet they often remain fragmented and untold. Beyond documenting trauma, this work restores agency, highlighting the resilience and resistance of enslaved peoples as archived or as active historical actors. It also allows us to better understand present-day social realities through their historical roots. At the Nelson Mandela Center, we have also engaged critically with the iconography of slavery. Too often, representations reduce enslaved individuals to passive suffering. We work closely with artists to rethink these visual narratives, encouraging more nuanced and dignified representations. Through art, we are able to unravel untold histories, bringing forward emotions, silences, and forms of memory. And in doing so, we move towards a more inclusive narrative that restores dignity and recognizes African heritage as central to Mauritian identity. Thank you.
Brilliant. That's great. So we're gonna go back now for a bit. Faith, have a second question for you about UNESCO, which is having UNESCO often working at the intersection of policy, communities, and international collaboration. What are some of the key challenges countries face when trying to translate cultural potential into tangible economic and social impact?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. And it's one of the projects that we're doing at UNESCO. It's about the 2030 culture indicators. If we have the Ministry of Arts and Culture here, they must know about it because we're having that project in Mauritius. The first time it was in Kenya, and then we saw its impact. That's why we brought it in Mauritius. What is 2030 culture indicators? That is exactly what the panelists who are here and the ones who are before were mentioning about. We do not have data for culture. We are doing a lot of culture and creative, amazing stuff, but we cannot be able to measure exactly what we are doing. For an investor to come and invest in the creative sector or in the culture sector, they're not able to see what is, and I think the investment team talked about it very well. They cannot be able to measure what is the impact of the creatives. And that could be from the social side, it could be in the economic side, it could be in the preservation side. Do we have data? And that's one of the major challenges that we are having. We do not have data, and of course we are doing an amazing job, and that's why we have, and I know we are really trying as CSOs that are represented here, ministries and other the banks and others who are trying to see what is the data that is available so that we can be able to support CCIs. But that's one of the biggest challenge that we're having. And UNESCO has introduced the 2030 culture indicators where we get to find how is the participation of the public when it comes to culture. Do we have safe, or we don't call it safe spaces, but do we have spaces where culture is showcased in terms of creatives, in terms of the pieces that our creatives are doing, in terms of cultural heritage, in terms of preservation of it? Do we have those spaces? Do we have people visiting? Are we having the cultural officers in those places capacitated? Do we have those data? We do not have. So we work on speculations, and when we meet, we of course have the data, we have the information, but we do not have it somewhere where an investment partner, a ministry, a government will be able to say, okay, this is what we've been able to do. Can we be able now to invest? And that's why you'll find that, and you'll agree with me, most of the ministries of culture have the lowest budget in our countries. Why? Because people are yet to get to know what is the impact of CCIs so that they can be able to put more money. And this is not only in a state function or in a state way, but also internationally. When we're having international donors, investors coming on board and want to fund CCIs, you find that they are limited on what they can give us. Because even what they give us is yet still not enough. And this is because we are having the largest demographic dividend of young people in Africa engaging in the creative side. That means we are having over 20 million young people in Africa and even in the Indian Ocean, when we're looking at the seeds, investing in the CCIs. But then again, at the end of the day, we do not have people who are giving us that capacity to move forward and to do greater things, even economically. And above economically, just ensuring that there's a preservation of it. The other most important challenge, not actually important, but really a dire need that we are facing as the African continent, and even more so also when we're looking in the Indian Ocean region, we're looking at the recognition of culture and creative industries being an important sector in our countries, but are we implementing it in our frameworks? Good, we are putting it in our development frameworks. It's being recognized actually. Once you go into different development frameworks, you find that culture and creative industries is recognized. But do we have achievable goals that we put in place to say, this is what we're looking forward to achieve? Again, remember, we go back to the data. We have it recognized. Actually, according to one of the reports that we have for UNESCO, it's called Reshaping the Cultural Creatives. Once you go online, you can see we launched that report this year in February. It shows that 93% of Africa, actually globally, where we have UNESCO member states, have recognized culture in their development frameworks and plans. But when you look on the other side of what are some of the tangible actions, the tangible results that have been achieved in it, they're not documented, yet a lot is being done on the ground. Or you find that even in the culture ministries and the CEOs that are doing, sometimes we lack expertise. We need capacity building, we need market exchange, we need regional cooperation so that people can be able to engage and learn from one another. We need more training on digital platforms on how can I market my work outside there. So you see, we have the recognition in our plans, but we do not have achievable things that we can put on the table and run with it. The other thing that I'd like to mention is about the weak institutional capacity and coordination. When you talk about culture, we're not talking about a Ministry of Culture which is standalone. Remember, culture is every one of us. Culture is in trade, culture is in finance, culture is in agriculture, culture is in education. Culture lies everywhere. At the end of the day, even if you have the Ministry of Culture, we need to have an interministerial coordination so that we can be able to execute culture. And this is where we had one of our participants who was mentioning about education. And I'm looking at it, yes, it's very important because that is where you start the intergenerational knowledge, where they need to understand about culture, where they need to be educated. So what does that mean? It means that ministries need to get to a point, even before we look at how can we have regional integration, how can we have interministerial coordination. Again, that will help even as we're giving out our data at the end of the year. And this is, I believe you're all aware that UNESCO, under the 2005 Convention, which lies the issue of creative industries, we usually have a 2-year report, if I'm not wrong, which is usually submitted on what we've been able to do in terms of creative industries. Then in that sense, because of the interministerial, because of having actionable policy plans, because of ensuring that you have data, more can be done internally and even outside. The other thing is the sector is, another challenge we're having is the informality of the culture and creative sector. Yet, we're talking about it being, actually, Africa has a greater potential by 2030 of increasing the GDP of CCIs to even 30%.
To be successful,
of course, a lot of things are being done. UNESCO is having the IFCD fund, which is the promotion. It's a fund that supports the creative industries. We're doing something. We've had a budget of 30 million. We've spent so far to 50 projects and almost $300 million. But then again, when you hear that $300 million, it's not a lot. You're talking to creative industries. We still need more money. So there is change that is being done by a few of organizations, a few of investors, but then you realize that a lot has to be done. And it's a good thing that we know that we are being backed by a few frameworks which are really important to us, the African Union Agenda 2063. We're talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Funds, and this is the UN 2030 Agenda. It's good that we have those frameworks, but we need to come together and understand that this is not an informal sector. It's a sector that needs to be the most powerful sector, a sector that we need to have data like any other sector so that we can be able to push forward the economic value, but apart from that, to ensure that our identity remains, even as we continue to ensure that we are targeting for economic rise. Thank you.
I can add, I agree with you. I mean, the culture ministry, they have the low budgets, the lowest all over the world, not only in Africa, unfortunately. But for what concerns my own experience, in 2022, so 4 years ago, I brought Namibia at the Venice Biennale, so as its first national pavilion. And this was an entire adventure, because what you said before, it resonates with me a lot, because the problem when you want to represent a new country to Venice Biennale, they want to have the letter of the Ministry of Culture or the Prime Minister, whatever, to ask to be represented, to participate. So when you go to the government said, yes, we want, but we don't have money. So who gives the money? So as we said, follow the money. So follow the money. And they asked me, oh, you give us the money, because otherwise, if we go, when you have to submit a participation to the Venice Biennale, you have to give the letter of the minister from the state, the location already granted. So the location is the most expensive item in the Biennale, because each location is for 6 months and it's so expensive. It's at least 100K euro. So of course, before anything starting yet, shipping, insurance, production of the artists, you have to pay for the location. And the government, they say they don't have money. So that's why, at the end, for me, it was a huge effort, not only financially, but also, political and everything. But also what is said is that the government, they could say, we don't have the money. Fair enough. But we can ask our maybe financial system, our banks, our, big the players in the trade, in the market industry, to finance us. No, they don't do anything. They just say, okay, do you have the money?
And I'm Italian, I'm not from Namibia, and I'm willing to do it. But then what I can do? I can do once, and I did it, but I cannot do every edition. And I wanted to do, for example, Ethiopia, because I work a lot with Ethiopian artists. I love Ethiopia. And again, the same problems. So who made Ethiopia now pavilion? The gallery. So, which is with their own artists. So the Biennale, which is sort of, Olympics from culture, he is driven now by the market. And he's not right. And because they will promote their own artists, one showman, instead of representing, more than one artist to give. So this is, that's why we have to think here, and to be able, the idea of a Biennale here in the Mauritius or Seychelles has to take advantage of all these kind of sort of mistakes or bad procedures that we have in other platforms, and trying to shape here with local, with your artists and your financial systems, because we, of course, some governments, even in Italy, the government, the Ministry of Culture has low budget, very low, unfortunately. And I agree with you, if we don't have culture, we lose everything, because we lose direction. But the ministry can ask, can really, not be mandatory, but he can ask to the financial market to help him. And that will solve a lot of distortions taken by the market dynamics that we don't want. We want culture, which is different from market. So this is briefly my experience in the Biennale, which was, I wish to do again, but maybe to do here instead of Venice. Why not?
Thank you very much, and we love seeing what the challenges in data funding are and how to address them in a very impactful way. So thank you for your words. I'm going to move on to Whitney again. So your work often addressing themes like economic systems, reparations, and environmental justice. How can artistic practices help conversations that are often dominated by academic, political discourse, and how can we make them legible to new audiences?
Thank you for this question. I reckon we're running out of time very soon. So allow me to start by just saying my primary call to action being here is that, yes, the artists need to be helped in the sense of being given grants and being given opportunities and capacity building and skill building. But there is actually a little bit more beyond this. And I think it sort of comes back to what the gentleman in the navy blue shirt was kind of pointing out a little earlier with his questioning, which is there is a fundamental way that we perceive art that we need to expand and challenge. Artists can contribute beyond how we already traditionally anticipated. And I really applaud the African Union for their present effort to perceive art as a non-traditional mechanism for multilateral diplomacy. So that is one way that art can be expanded beyond exhibition walls and art fairs, for example. There is effort happening currently in Geneva at the CDHM. We can read a little bit about it. And what they're doing up there is that they're leveraging art as an instrument for academic and political discourse. And this kind of answers your question a little bit. In my practice, one case example that I would give you is partnering with 𝗕𝘂𝗶𝗹𝗲, an investigative journalist from Switzerland, to investigate the cocoa value chain between Ghana, the second largest exporter of cocoa, and Switzerland, which is the largest chocolate producing company. So he comes to Ghana for 2 to 3 years because the president says Ghana is no longer exporting cocoa to Switzerland. And for 2 to 3 years, he investigates, not politically, whether this president is saying something useful or not, no. He investigates the extent to which we all understand what his statement meant. What are the histories, the present circumstances, and the future implications of a decision like this for both African and European stakeholders? And after these 2 to 3 years, there's a lot of information that he finds, and he hands it over to me to create an artwork. An artwork because, yes, technical experts would be able to access this documentary and understand this complexity, but there will still be students or general publics who might not sit down for a 2 to 3 hour lecture on what these complexities are. And so he partners with an artist as a co-conspirator, and there is economic exchange between African and European stakeholders to deliver value for both contexts. So this is another way that we can perceive artists as non-traditional collaborators in very traditional systems. And so this is one way that I want to challenge us in all of our thematic areas, because I do know that there are corporates, artists, institutional representatives at various levels in the room. If you look at your very traditional expectations of how artists can collaborate with you, beyond looking at how you can help artists, consider how you can work with artists to expand the impact of the work you're doing and the reach of the work you're doing. Because considering also the financial constraints that are happening globally with multilateral institutions, creative collaborations could even create more opportunities for funding opportunities and sharing between these institutions, and could actually incentivize private sector collaboration because of shared agenda. So that's just a call to action and an answer to your question.
Thank you very much. So I'm being mindful that we're a bit short on time. Stefan, I want to go back to you, and I wanted to ask, since institutions like the Nelson Mandela Center play an essential role in preserving historical memory and engaging with new generations, let's talk about the future. How can cultural institutions make these narratives more accessible and more meaningful for the younger audiences?
So, but what we are doing, we move beyond the traditional way of transmission and dissemination of historical information, for example. We actively work with youngsters. They are mostly our main stakeholders, and we engage them in history. We encourage them to create through participatory activities like storytelling, poetry, slam competition, interaction with artists, workshops. No, we historians, we write books, but more and more youngsters, they are no longer willing to read very bulky books. So through like documentary produce, audiovisual materials, and genealogy project, we have a project whereby people can trace back their ancestry, maybe Africa or elsewhere, and through engaging with their past, they are able to create and reimagine their narratives by writing, by creating poetry, or by creating an artwork.
To ask our organizers how we're doing time-wise.
Yes, Q&A.
Yeah, we have a Q&A then. So we have a couple questions in the public, so please. Right here.
Thank you very much. I just joined the meeting, so maybe the answer to my question would have been answered yesterday, but I don't know, I still have to ask it, I think. It is a fact that in Europe, for example, and Western countries, that art contributes quite a bit to it's a very big economic pillar. In Africa, it's still not the case, and yet when you look at the energy of many Africans, you find that there's so much that can be done, and yet it is not the case. The thing is that we have these young people, very talented in Africa. How do we convince them that they can live off their art? And there is one big elephant in the room which we are not addressing, and that is the AI industry. And we know that one soundbite from a creator can easily be picked up and it can easily be distributed, which means that that IP is lost. What is the reflection, be it in the creative sector, be it in the music sector? How our multilateral organization, you mentioned UNESCO, you mentioned AU, how are they tackling this? Because this presents a very big threat and can be really can bring down a lot of the artists who may not be able to live off the art. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. It was one of the things that I needed to mention about digital space and AI. So what is really happening right now, we are not having the regulation of AI. AI is being misused left, right, and center. No one is using it, and also when you're looking at the CCIs, no one is using it for their benefit or for the benefit of the CCI in terms of either their resilience, cohesion, or even when you look on the other side, when you're looking at the economic side. When you're looking at the other side of digital transformation, again, I had mentioned earlier where we are having young people, again, Africa is a vibrant, young, demographic nation. And we have over 1 million, or I think even 10 million of African or young Africans who are in the CCI sector. But do they have digital skills? Do they have the capacity building on how they can maximize that space? Because how we have it maximized in the Europe side is not exactly how we are maximizing it here. Now, if we're looking at it in the sense that it's been maximized in Africa, and Africa including even the Indian Ocean, we have the issue where there is piracy. And this again revolves down to the issue of AI not being regulated. We are having piracy issue. Actually, right now, if a content creator or a creative does amazing work, and you remember the story that I gave you for the Madagascar, you find that at the end of the day, they're not paid 100% of what they're supposed to be paid. And that's clearly, and it's a good question. Right now that we're looking into the digital era, I think it's a question we need to ask each other. What exactly are we doing in this giant of AI and digital transformation? Because we will create digital platforms for our creatives where they can ensure that instead of having fragmented things done in different countries, we can all have a platform where we have the regional integration of whatever they are doing, and in the sense that we can have visibility, we can have market access. If we have more funding, we can have mobility of our creatives, of our artists, of our cultural professionals. But then at the end of the day, are they capacitated enough? Are we having regulations that are in place to ensure that they're regulating the issue of the AI? What are we doing in the issues of piracy? Because at the end of the day, I'm not paid as a creative, I'm not paid what I'm supposed to be paid because there's piracy. Do we have policies in place as a country, as a continent, that is ensuring that a creative, however which level you are in, you are given back what you're supposed to do. So this is something that we are all, UNESCO, the AU, the 2030 agenda is currently doing as a big giant, trying to figure out how can we work with artists to ensure that we ensure there's regulation all throughout. They have their benefit, we have economic value for our countries going up and in terms of GDP, and also ensuring that we also have more promotion of our CCIs. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have.
But I have the feeling that we've been going around the main subject. We're not touching the main points. What are the actions that should be taken in our context to make this industry work? And sometimes I feel that we have been forgetting the main element in all this ecosystem. There would be no art galleries, no museums, no curators, no Ministry of Art and Culture, no Ministry of no Minister of Art and Culture without the artists. And sometimes we tend to forget the artists. We talk about all the elements that goes around and what is being done. I think my friend from Seychelles was aiming that question before, but there was no answer to that. What do we do to support the artists, to support creations? What are the infrastructure that should be laid so that art can flourish? And then the market, once you start to support the art industry, I think it becomes sustainable by itself. If you look into the US, they don't have any Ministry of Arts and Culture, but still art is flourishing. Sometimes you have Ministry of Arts and Culture, it's just a kind of barrier to the promotion of art to the I think what we should talk about first, what are the infrastructures that should be laid down and what should be done to support artists. And in terms of collectors, I believe that there should be a kind of grooming of collectors. Like in Mauritius, I have started myself, every time I have an exhibition, we have a collector's night, where we invite young collectors, we instruct them what is the meaning of collecting art, why you collect, what kind of emotional relationship you should have with something that you collect. It's not about making money, it's not about investment. It will become investment in the future. And I think that grooming is also very important. And what we teach, what about art education in our schools? Because when we teach art at our school, it is those little kids that tomorrow will become kind of supporters of the creative industry, and they will become the main actors of that creative industry.
Brilliant. So we have two answers for your question, or questions.
I start because thank you for this question. It's crucial. I said at the beginning now that the power used art to celebrate itself, and it's time to reverse this relationship, and it's the power to celebrate the artists and to put the artists at the center. So I totally agree with you that nothing would be the culture without the artists, without the invention of the art. What I was saying before through my own experience is that we need to solicit the financial players to be accountable for the art. Otherwise, you will have external investments that will, you know, when an artist, and you are an artist, you become visible, then you have also to question yourself, who is benefiting for this? I mean, it's me or it's somebody else, or the one who is sponsoring me. So it's very important, in my opinion, is to have financial investors, local, to invest in cultures. And then, of course, to buy art, to collect is important, but also to fund production, to fund research, and to fund schools. But I mean, this always comes to the financial, so follow the money. So we have to commit everyone a little bit, but also really the market, the local market, to spend and to sponsor the culture. It's very important because this, otherwise you will have external forces of the market doing that, and they will shape, and you will feel like you have to answer to the call, but you want to be free in your art. You don't want to answer to somebody, I think. So this is very important to give this opportunity from the local financial, operators. This is my opinion on this.
My answer is a bit different. I just want to mention maybe 2 or 3 examples of things that were done that I deeply liked and I want to see it scaled. In Ghana, one thing that they did is they selected the 5 creatives who were kind of showing evidence of success in their careers, and then they gave all 5 of them diplomatic passports to overcome the traveling barriers that existed for artists. When you have an exhibition in Indonesia, then you have to go to Kazakhstan, and then you have to go to Europe, somewhere in Europe, without having to apply for visas, and that's affecting your career. They were giving diplomatic passports to facilitate their travel and movement, right? So that's one thing I saw that Ghanaian governments did, and I didn't even know that was possible. So I absolutely love that. And what that does is that for artists like me, then I know that I can aspire to perform to a level and become an evidence of the kind of artist that can merit this kind of access and make a useful contribution beyond my nation. And I'll mention the second one, which is kind of ties back to my data arts practice, but more vaguely, government partnering with creatives as the implementation muscle of what, as you were saying, about the existence of so many cultural developmental agendas and in the fine print, but in practice, the implementation becomes a problem. Leveraging creatives and putting them at the forefront of implementing some of these recommendations. For example, in November last year, I lobbied at the AU-EU Youth Forum in 2025 in Angola for a recommendation of the multilateralism that said leveraging creative minilaterals to be able to advance or democratize knowledge. But then since then, what happened was I was included in the project inception meeting, the bunch of 45-year-olds, to kind of include the young creative voice in the room when the timeline for project execution was being mapped out. And so that's another way that I noticed that if more artists could be included in the room, where creatives are usually told what happened in the room, that's an alternative way that I think creatives can be practically empowered to participate. So these are the two examples that I saw that I deeply shifted something in my thinking.